Pasiklausykime pranašo Ozėjo knygos. Štai ką Viešpats kalba. Aš vesiuos savo tautą į dykumą ir piršiuos jos širdžiai. Ji noriai ten eis, kaip jaunystės laikais, kaip tada, kai ji išėjo iš Egipto. Sutuoksiu tave su savim visam laikui. Sutuoksiu tave su savim dėl teisės ir teisingumo, dėl malonės ir gailestingumo. Sutuoksiu tave su savim dėl ištikimybės. Tada tu suprasi, jog aš esu Dievas. Atliepiamoji psalmė. Štai jaunikis, išeikite pasitikti Viešpaties Kristaus.
Štai jaunikis, išeikite pasitikti Viešpaties Kristaus.
Pasiklausykit, dukrelė, pažvelkit čionai, atkreipk savo ausį, užmiršk savo tautą ir tėviškę savo. Valdovui meili tu gražuolė, bet jis tavo Viešpats, pagarbink parpuolus. Štai jaunikis, išeikite pasitikti Viešpaties Kristaus. Žengia vidun tą karalaitę, apdaras jai gryno aukso pinigai. Brokatų papuošta įvedama pas valdovą. Iš paskos jai merginos, jos draugės, pas tave vedamos eina. Štai jaunikis, išeikite pasitikti Viešpaties Kristaus. Eidamos jos džiūgauja krykščia, į valdovo rūmus mat žengia. Tau tėvus atstos tavo sūnus, tu juos kunigaikščiai statysi valdyti visos žemės. Štai jaunikis, išeikite pasitikti Viešpaties Kristaus.
Tyra širdžiai, jie regės Dievą. Viešpats su jumis. Pasiklausykite Šventosios Evangelijos pagal Matą. Jėzus savo mokiniams pasakė šį palyginimą. Su dangaus karalystė bus panašia, kaip su 10 mergaičių, kuris pasiėmusis žibintus, išėjo pasitikti jaunikų. 5 iš jų buvo paikos ir 5 protingos. Taigi 5 pasiėmė žibintus, o nepasiėmė alyvos. Protingosios kartu su žibintais pasiėmė indusai ir alyvos. Jaunikui vėluojant, visos ėmė snausti ir užmigo. Vidurnaktį pasigirdo balsą. Stein, jaunikas, išeikite pasitikti. Tuomet visos mergaitės atsikėlė ir taisėsi žibintus. Paikosios sakė protingosioms, duokite mums alyvos, nes mūsų žibintai gęsta. Protingosios atsakė, kad kartais nepristigtų mums. Ir jums viršum nueikite pas prekiautojus ir nusipirkite. Joms vėjant pirkti atėjo jaunikas. Kur jos buvo pasiruošusios, ėjo kartu su juo į vestuves ir durys buvo uždarytos. Vėliau atėjo ranos mergaitės ir ėmė prašytis. Gerbaimasis, atidaryk čia mes. O jis atsakė, iš tiesų sakau jums, aš jūsų nepažįstu. Taigi budėkite, nes nežinote nei dienos, nei valandos. Girdėjote viešpaties žodį. The wise and the foolish virgins, a gospel passage we may recognize as belonging to the Advent season. And so it's a gospel passage that reminds us of the importance of being prepared, but even more important, the consequences, the harsh consequences of not being prepared. For the door will be locked, and we will not be recognized. How harsh is that? But we're not in the Advent season. So let us focus simply on the last phrase of the gospel passage. One that is addressed to both the wise and the foolish, for they were all asleep. And the command is, stay awake. Stay awake. You know not the day or the hour. The American author Henry David Thoreau once wrote that the day dawns only on those who are awake. The day dawns only on those who are awake. Stay awake. Be alert. Be attentive. Pay attention. This is the challenge of the gospel. For you do not know the day or the hour, but what do we know? We know that there is a destiny. We know that there is an end. We know by faith that there is the promise of eternal life. So in these last 18 months or so, when many were faced with unexpected death because of COVID, what we can be sure of is that there is the promise for them of eternal life. Unexpected as death was, the end to this life, the promise exists, eternal life. This is what Jesus continues, especially in the Gospel of Matthew, to tell his disciples. Be alert, be alive. They're concerned, okay, if the end is coming, when? When is it going to come? Just so I can get ready. We want to get that last prayer in, the dying prayer, deathbed conversion. That's what we're hoping for. Live the life as we want until the end comes, and then we can say, bless me, Father, and away I go to heaven on the express train. It doesn't happen that way. Jesus says, don't worry about that. Live fully today with your eye on what you believe to be the end, the promise of eternal life. The message, the challenge of the gospel for us today. And within this gospel, we celebrate or commemorate the Saint Teresa Benedikta of the Cross. Born in 1891 to a Jewish family, a very faithful Jewish family, in an area that is now part of Poland. She was brought up very faithful. Her father died when she was 2. She was one of 11 children. As many teenagers, the faith began to kind of go aside a little, and she declared herself to be an atheist. But teenagers oftentimes do that. But as she grew, she took that even further and became a philosopher, one of the first women accepted to a German university to study philosophy. And her focus was on the philosophy of woman, the nature of woman. She became a very prolific speaker on the topic, invited many places, recognized for her intellect. One day she stumbled upon the writings of St. Teresa of Avila, the foundress of the Carmelite sisters. She was moved by this. and began to question the separation of philosophy and faith, and began to realize that there really is an integration between the two. While on vacation in Cologne, I don't know what you do on vacation, but on vacation in Cologne, she wasn't looking for a restaurant or going to play golf or anything like that. She stumbles upon a church and gets baptized. I think it was 1922, which would make her about 31 years old. Her family was very upset about this. At the same time, she begins to consider maybe she should be a Carmelite sister, but decides this will really get her family upset, so she better not go there. At least not yet. So 1922. In the 1930s, the Nazi movement is growing gaining strength in Germany. In 1933, her colleagues are beginning to fear for her life, knowing that she is a Jew by birth and a woman philosopher. They encourage her to leave Germany. Instead, she decides to now pursue a vocation in religious life and joins the Carmel, or the convent, in Cologne. And there continues her formation as a contemplative sister, but her study also in reflection on the nature of woman, making it more scripturally based, particularly focusing on the book of Genesis. In 1938, you may know, it was the horrible Kristallnacht, in which the persecution of the Jews really became very public. The sisters began to fear for her in Germany and packed her up and shipped her off to the safe place of the Netherlands. At least they thought this was going to be safe. Eventually, the Nazis, as you know, invaded the Netherlands, and the bishops courageously spoke out against the tactics of the Nazis. So the Nazis responded by going after not only Jews, but the baptized Jews who were, in their eyes, hiding behind baptism. And they corralled the baptized Jews, the Christians now, particularly those in convents. And there they found, now no longer Edita Stein, but Sister Teresa Benedikta of the Cross, and her sister Rosa, who had also joined the convent after their mother died. And they're taken away to the concentration camp. And there she is martyred. And so the church recognizes the religious, the contemplative, an intellectual, a martyr. And we could say that's the end of the story. But how is it that she can be raised for us as an example of a person who stayed awake, who was attentive, lived her life fully with an eye on the promise of eternal life? And a lot of that becomes evident in her reflection, in her intellectual work. Pope John Paul II recognized this so much, that it was St. Teresa Benedikta's work and also Edita Stein's work before she was a sister that he used as the basis for much of his writing on the dignity of all persons. If you remember, that was a big theme for John Paul II. The dignity, respecting the dignity of all persons. He relied a lot on the writings of St. Teresa Benedikta. And so in 1987, he's actually the one who beatified her, and in 1989, she was canonized in the sacred church. But what is it about her writing? Again, based on the writings of the book of Genesis, she wrote about the fundamental nature, the distinction between man and woman. Her writings might be good to revisit these days, when many in our world seem to be confused about the distinction between man and woman. But Sister Benedikta wrote about this in the 30s and the 40s, based on Genesis, where there are some philosophers who buy into the sense that the body and the soul are separate. And therefore, there can be a distinction between how the body is and what the soul feels. We see that happening today. But Sister Teresa took the teachings or the work of St. Thomas Aquinas, a Thomistic philosophy, that says the body and the soul are integrated. They cannot be separated. So what is visible on the outside is really what God has implanted on the inside. That is the gift. That is the grace. That is the blessing. It cannot be separated. She particularly wrote about the nature of woman, the traits of the feminine soul. And she characterized it as maternal and companionship. Maternal in that the feminine soul is geared towards nurturing, towards protection, towards growth. The feminine soul is also geared towards companionship, a shared life. Well, that's also for the masculine soul. But for the feminine soul, the emphasis was on empathy, the ability to step into another's life experience and to feel with another. And she wrote that that is more of a feminine trait. As I say that, I begin to think, boy, the feminists would not like St. Teresa, Benedikta of the cross. They would like to leave her on the cross, I'm sure. Because they would say, well, that seems to say that the woman's place is in the kitchen, taking care of the house and the husband and the children. And Sister Benedikta, if you read the whole of her work, you begin to realize that that's not at all what she was talking about. After all, she wasn't married, she was a nun. She didn't have children. She wasn't stay at home, taking care of the house or husband. She was a philosopher, one who reflected on life and spoke often about it. She's a woman of her time and of our time. For she felt that these traits, lived fully, are necessary for all professions and necessary to be evident in the world today. And to live these fully is for a woman to live her purpose without labeling her as a mom or a wife, but as a woman. And this is the core of her soul. And only then can you keep your eye on the destiny that is planned and promised, that of eternal life. So she, in her own way, was saying, stay awake, be attentive, know who you are, and live true to yourself, fully today, with an eye on the future. It's a lesson for us. Stay awake. We don't know the day or the hour, but we're invited to live fully, to be the voice of justice in a world of injustice, to be the voice of care in a world that is sometimes careless and ignorant, blind to the needs of others, to be a voice of generosity in a world that sometimes wants to be protected. These are the traits for all of us. Man, woman, baptized, unbaptized, faithful, doubting. This is what God has given us. Let us live fully with our eye confident of our destiny, the promise of eternal life. brangiai susirinkę kaip viena ateitininkiška šeima prie Kristaus altoriaus, prašykime jo maloniai savo ir visai žmonijai.
Melskimės už visą pasaulį, kad išvystų savo buvimą garbingą prasmę ir eitų viešpaties keliais, nuolankiai prašome. Melskimės už šio krašto ir Lietuvos valdžios žmonės, kad Dievas laimintų jų užsimojimus kelti visų gyventojų gerbūvį. Nuolankiai prašome.
Išklausyk mus, viešpatie.
Melskimės už sunkiai sergančiuosius, kad vienijimasis su Kristumi uostų juos dangiškąja viltimi. Nuolankiai prašome.
Išklausyk mus, viešpatie.
Melskimės už save, kad viešpaties malonės padedami savo pavyzdžių neatstumtumėme nuo Jėzaus nei vieno, kuris jo ieško. Nuolankiai prašome.
Išklausyk mus, viešpatie.
Melskimės už mūsų mirusius artimuosius, už Algirdą Kraujelį, minint jo 33 mirties metines, ir už Jadvygą Kliorienę, šiandien minint jos pirmasias mirties metines. Melskimės, kad jie patirtų Dievo gailestingumą ir rastų amžiną džiaugsmą jau prieglaustyje. Nuolankiai prašome.
Išklausyk mus, viešpatie.
Tyloje išsakykime savo intencijas. Ir visi kartu nuolankiai prašykime.
Išklausyk mus, viešpatie.
Tai prašome per Kristų mūsų viešpatį.